Peace and blessings, everybody. We back once again, Swamp Water Roots. We back once again. I had an interesting read, man. I was studying some languages, and I thought I would share. I thought I would share some of this with you guys about some Kikongo. Because one thing from and I've studied a few different African languages, like Shona. I know some Shona. I'm trying to study some Yoruba, so I'm gonna get into that lately. I'm gonna get into studying Yoruba. I've been studying Swahili. You know, I know some good Swahili a little bit. You know, a little supper supper, and Kikongo. What's interesting about, and I look at a lot of other African languages as far as learning different words and phrases inside of them in these languages. But what's interesting, man, is about when we look at the way that our ancestors actually used language in order to communicate with the spirits. You know what I mean? It became, it's interesting because language has a certain meaning to it. Language has a certain meaning to it to where when you use a particular language, it has a deeper connotation than the present language you're using. Some people like to perpetuate that idea. I think for the most part that the idea it's a yes and no with me with it. I understand the tonal structure of African languages in retrospect of using those languages and when you're speaking to your spirits or when you're conducting a ceremony or when you're praying, there are different levels to this thing. I think the tonal structure, the tone, when we communicate with our spirits, it doesn't necessarily have to deal with the language that we're using. It deals with the force that comes from within us, from our diaphragm area, when we bring out the words that we speak when we're ritually engaged. Now, with that being said, we travel over to the conversation of language. When you combine the force that comes here with the language, tonal language, what happens is you're sending a higher frequency up into the universe. You're sending a higher frequency into the spiritual realm. You're sending a higher frequency to whatever dimension you're traveling on or whatever dimension you're trying to get at. So when we see our ancestors and we notice that our ancestors composed certain songs, let's get it. They put together certain songs with certain specific meanings, and they would only sing these songs during certain times. For example, when we research and we study ancient Kemet, we find that even the ancient Egyptians, the ancient Kemetic people, along with ancient Bantu tribes, along with ancient West African tribes, along with ancient North African tribes, South African tribes, and East African tribes, they all sung songs. They all had songs dedicated to specific parts of the earth. You see, specific parts of the earth. So when it came to going to the rivers, no matter what African culture that you went into or what African culture you study, there are songs for the rivers, songs for veneration of the river, song for veneration of the river spirits of that particular culture. You see? Now, what's the purpose of the song? The purpose of the song is to ignite the energy, to activate the energy. Not only to activate the energy, but to intune yourself with the energy from you repetitively and harmoniously reciting these words in a tonal structure that creates a vibration that activates the spiritual force of the river or the spiritual force of the forest. Then you call that force forth. But the purpose of the song is to activate it. You see? To activate. But within the song is the language. And this is why we study African language. As melanated people, we study African language because we want to connect with the correct tonal structure, not the tonal structure that we've been kind of perpetuated with, the one that we were taught, the English. Now, see, I'm going to tell you about English, the English language. Many people might agree, some people might not agree. But the English language, right, is all corrupted when it comes to anything magical. And I'm being honest. Because we learn English from English speaking people. What we don't lose is our tonal structure. That it don't matter. That's why, like I talk Geechee Gala because I still possess the tonal structure. There are many people in the South, many people in the North, all over. We still possess the tonal structure of our African heritage. So when we speak to our spirits, we don't speak to our spirits and, hey George, can you warrant me in a manifestation, George? We don't speak to our spirits like that. We speak to our spirits in a cultural, tonal way that we have been raised to communicate with each other. You see? So, talking in English to your spirits is one thing, but talking black to your spirits is another, you know? So, I personally communicate with my spirits in English. And I talk to them just like I talk to you, you know? But I also understand when there are certain things going on a deeper level, or when I want to communicate with an even more ancient spirit, I start speaking in African. And I speak to my spirits in African because those are the spirits that understand that language. Because trust me, we have spirits that clearly understand English. Clearly. Because they from this land. So when the people came here, they've been learned this language. They've been know what's going on with the English. And you got spirits in our African bloodline who already knew it before they came here. So there are some spirits, many of our spirits that already know this language. So we can communicate with them directly in the language. But there are other spirits that kind of pretty much require that we communicate with them in a different language, a more ancient language, because they'll clearly understand us more. I'm not saying that they won't understand you at all. They will clearly understand you more when you start speaking the ancient language of the culture from which the spirit comes from. That's what I'm saying. So when we're talking about Bantu spirits, you know, people working with the Bantu spirits, I know many of y'all work that Kindoki, that witchcraft, and many of y'all working with the Bantu spirits on many different levels and different degrees. But for the most part, when you communicate with them, the best way, I think, of my personal opinion, is when you blend your English with the Kikongo. Certain things you say in Kikongo, certain things you say in English. You see? Now, when you greet your spirits, when you greet them, when you first come out the door and you start greeting them, you want to greet them in the language that they're familiar with from the culture. Then you go on to your English. You know? I got spirits from Africa. A lot of things I got from Africa. And they've been consecrated over there in Africa, and then I got them when they came over here. So when I communicate with them, I communicate with them in African, you know. I kick Kikongo to them. You know, when I approach them, I keep mbote. You know, I tell them how you doing, man, and now let's get to talking. You know, because that's one of the ways that our ancestors actually communicated. You know, they communicated in their language to the spirits. So when we inherit those spirits, we should inherit the language that goes along with the spirits. You see what I'm saying? Because hidden within the language is actually meanings. Hidden within the songs is actually meanings for us to understand. You see? Hidden within all that is meanings. For example, on my Facebook page, I posted the Kikongo word Nganga. In Kikongo, the word Nganga means a priest, a high priest, man, somebody who know how to work the witchcraft, who know how to make the medicine, who know how to heal people. That's an Nganga in Africa, in Congo, and to be particular. Now, in Congo, the word Ngangu means intelligence. Right. Now, if we just look at the word Nganga, we would think, you know, the word Nganga, man, is a priest. You know, this all he do is witchcraft. You know, witchcraft. That's all we think about. But then come to find out, the root word of Nganga is Ngangu, which means intelligence, a wise person. So that means that person has to be a thinker. It's not all about witchcraft. It's really not. It's about having the right thoughts, having the right ideas, the right inclinations to be able to help people. So it's more than just the roots and the herbs. It's about thinking. You see? And this is something that our ancestors was very strong on. And this is why hidden in the language is the interpretations to what things really, really absolutely mean. So studying a language is very important. Studying the African language is very important. Now you can pray in your English. You can do all your work in English. You can communicate with the spirits in English. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But when it comes to understanding the principles, when it comes to understanding what our African ancestors taught and how they thought, how they perceived the world, how they perceived what their root working were, you got to understand the language. Because they encoded and they hid certain things in the language. So you might be saying something, not know what you're saying, but there's a true deeper interpretation, just like the word Nganga. Over here in the West, the word Nganga, in most Paulo Beyambe circles, they call that the pot, the cauldron. That's an Nganga. But in the African perspective, for those that follow the true African traditions, the Nganga is the priest. Because from the Nganga comes Omunganga, which means a doctor. And Munganga in Uganda, Munganga, which means a doctor. Who do we even work with? None of the other stuff, like spirits and roots and herbs. These Mungangas and Umungangas are real doctors. They will perform surgery on you, get the root healing if you need it. And they are part of an intelligent class of people. Highly intelligent. Thinkers, troubleshooters, people that can work out problems and issues on all kind of levels. You see? So by understanding the language that we, that we pretty much involved with, understanding the language that we speak when we speaking with the African spirits, understanding the language that our ancestors used, we understand it encoded within our languages certain things, certain understandings. It's not just the word. When it comes to African languages, there are words and there are root words. You see? Like we talked about, the word Nganga, it has more of a connotation to it. Not just what we are taught in the West that this Nganga is a part. No, it's not. This Nganga, you see, is a priest, a wise man, somebody with wisdom and knowledge. So when we talk about the Mungangas and the Omungangas, we're talking about people, a whole class of intelligent people who become doctors, who become blacksmiths, who become all of these different technological fields that we need in our society in order for the society to grow. It's not a pot. You see, and this is why we stay in tune with the African conceptualization of what things are. When we stay in tune with the African conceptualization of what things are, nobody can come and tell us different. And if they do, they're wrong. For the most part. Now I'm looking inside my Kikongo book right here. This is a nice one. This is a nice one. Beta Tuba Kikongo, it's a good book. Let me look back in it. Like for example, let's look at some other words that we might be familiar with. Flipping through. Or like the word Nkisi. That's another word. Like the word Nkisi, it means medicine in Congo. It means medicine. And you find the word Kisi, it means food, a feast. You see what I'm saying? But in the West, some people would say that the Nkisi is a spirit that does this and that. All that stuff. But in Nkisi, medicine, food, meaning that all of the spiritual forces of the roots and the herbs and the plants that we eat is in Kisi. The foods is in Kisi. You know, not some dark spirit walking on the astral plane. The foods is the Nkisi. What we eat. That's why when we look in the word Nkisi, come from the word Kisi, the root word, feast. But we're not just feasting, we're feasting with all of the natural ingredients and all of the natural things that comes from the earth, that's right for us, that's righteous for us, that we already know through ancestral traditions. If we eat these berries, we eat these roots, we eat these grains, we eat these herbs, we make these teas, we make these potions. All of these things are kisi, food for us to eat, to grow, to live longer, to be healthier, to be more intelligent. Because you know the foods that we put in our body affects our mentality. Because our ancestors knew these things. So when we talk about the Nkisi and calling on the Nkisi, we're talking about calling on the nature spirits that live in the foods we eat to empower us with great health, which empowers us with great intelligence. You see? Like I say, the Nkisi is not a spirit that's running around cursing, hexing people and doing all the other things. Not from the African perspective of the way that it really came from. Now what we're dealing with now is what people turned it into. At Swamp Water Roots, like I say, like Dr. Fuquai, we're going back to the African origin, the African roots of a lot of things. You know what I mean? We're going way back to the days of Kadi and Pembe, you know? Let's get with it. Peace. It's Medicine Man. I'm out, man. We'll be back.